Okay, welcome to our virtual town hall, our second one we're doing in the COVID pandemic. So I certainly appreciate I think we're working a focus issue on the YouTube. So we'll work that out here real quick while I ramble a little and we do some adjustments. Well, I tell you, I'm sure you can hear me loud and clear. So we'll keep working the focus issue, but I guess the camera's having problems with my handsomeness, but the audio is coming through. So that's all good, and we're up on Facebook, so that's great. Hey, on the YouTube thing, I really wanted to try to get 1,000 followers on Facebook, and so it is our really our primary channel as opposed in the command structures to pass information out, but to expeditiously get it out there. I think Twitter we've got about 1,300 or so followers. YouTube we're all the way up to 67 as of right before this. So a key there, and like other influencers out there in the YouTube world, uh, like and subscribe to our channel. And the reason I tell you that is because as we get develop this channel, we'll be able to do more mobile YouTube stuff and not have the setup that we have to have here with our desktop computer once we get to 1,000. So I appreciate your help in jumping over and subscribing to our channel, so we can get information to everybody out there. That's really our what we're trying to do. We're trying to get access to everybody out there, providing questions through the different manners that we are able to provide questions. And certainly, if there's a way that you feel would work better, I'm open to hearing about that, getting you the answers you need. As we did last time, we'll go through, kind of transcribe the answers that I provide, and we'll put that document up hopefully by the end of the week so that you can get to that on our webpage to see the document. Focus still not working? Okay. Yeah, force it to focus something in there. Okay, good. Great. That'll do it. I guess it needed to focus on this. Okay. And so how's that look in the two cameras? Yeah, it's at a distance. We got the Facebook camera behind the YouTube one. But you guys know what this is. This is the whole flatten the curve thing. And I talked a little bit about that last time. I think everybody's their own expert on this concept. But I want to bring it up again because as I talked about in the video last week, there's a lot of discussion. You know, are we here at the apex? Are we approaching the apex? Where are we exactly? Well, wherever we are, we need to continue doing the things that have gotten us here. And I'll answer a few questions with that in mind. That that we need not be having parties, gathering people together. That we need to be now wearing face coverings, which I've got some questions here about face coverings I'll talk about. But the message there is, you know, all the policies that have been put in place along the way as we've climbed this mountain and suppressed the mountain as much as possible, we've got to keep those policies going as we hopefully continue down this side. What does this side look like? How much time does this take? I don't know. There's a lot of, I watch the news, I go through social media, et cetera. There's a lot of political discussion about all this. I'm not going to get into that. I'm just going to tell you what we're doing to prepare for the future, whatever that future holds. Hopefully, that future is going down this slope and getting to this, which the normal here may not look like the normal here in the end. And this may be a couple months out, it may be farther than that. We may get to a certain point here and then hold what we've got for a while and then come down. So there's a lot of criteria in here, a lot of decisions that we're working through, and there'll be There will be policies that govern this, and there will be local decisions that we can make. But I just want to impress upon everybody that we need to continue doing the things that we've been doing lately to to keep this suppressed. So I appreciate everybody's help in doing that. So I'll jump into the questions here, and I got some other things that I'll mention as we go. All right, we're going to start off with the child and youth programs. Got a few questions there. I'm going to start with the school age care. All right, I was just meeting this afternoon with some of our the management of our different programs, talking to them about what they're seeing in the centers, and they're and in retrospect, if I knew today, if I knew a month ago what I know today, how about that? If I knew a month ago what I know today, then there'd be some more rapid, probably applications of policies and those kinds of things. But we worked through those things as diligently as we could, and certainly those policies were coming down, and people were working feverishly to get policies like the daily rates that we've incorporated in the child and youth programs, and the ability to pull your kids out and reserve your spot on the in the program. So when we restore that later on down the curve, when we get to a decision point where we start going back down the level of CYP program, ultimately with the hope of going back to where we left it at the outset of this, then we'll get all those people back in. We'll work through all that decision, and we'll do it as equitably as we can. But there's been a lot of stress on the staff there, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate what the staff has gone through. Of course, everybody throughout our community have gone through their own individual situations, their own individual stresses and anxieties with deployments and homecomings, and spouses losing jobs because of the situation out there, and the mental health concerns out there, the ABA therapies and other things that people have to deal with. So, in amongst all that, we've got our CYP staff, and they have been going through a very anxious time here. So, in our so first of all, just in general in the CYP, the questions here: why are the frequent changes with CYP not being put out via email, in writing to the parents and our providers? Everything seems to be word of mouth or hearsay. CYP needs to email out the changes to providers and then have providers email out to parents so everything is clear. Why are the standards procedures for children in care with both parents essential changing, i.e. CYP requiring a signed schedule along with the request to the essential form without any instruction in writing? And I was told the head of CYP is personally calling the command of every parent whose child is dropped off for essential care to verify that they're actually at work. Seems like a gross misuse of energy and resources given the current crisis. The essential form has already proven that we are essential, and the requested signed schedule has already been submitted. So with those things, here's what I'll say. First of all, on the email thing, I agree with you that it would be great if we could have a system where you can just get that email directly to you as a parent. I've got an app that the school district uses, so our teacher for our second grader can communicate directly with us through the app. That's great. We've talked about that before. Programmatically, our CYP program isn't really at a place where it's got the system to be able to do that emailing. But that's certainly something that we are pushing back up to headquarters to try to include that. I think in today's world of connectivity, we really need the CYP staff to effectively and clearly communicate with the parents, especially when we go through a situation like this. So I certainly value that input. That's certainly something that I've believed, and we'll continue pushing that. Unfortunately, we don't really have the ability to do that locally very easily, but we can try to do better at that, and we'll certainly try to do better at that as we go through, especially as we go through a more deliberate process to come down the slope and restore CYP services. We will certainly look to do that ahead of time through emails and direct communications with parents so they understand where we are when we're approaching the next decision point, and work through that. So then, as far as the actual policies, I will tell you the head of the CYP, you might have heard that she's calling people all the commands individually, but she's not. But there is a lot of command verification of this information. I really rely on the CMC network to do that command verification of the mission critical status. And the whole reason about that is not to harass people, not to harass parents. It goes off the trust but verify. I would love to say that everybody out there is conforming to all the policies that we have in place, but they're not. Not everybody is. We unfortunately do have some people who take advantage of the situation, and our CYP is not open to everybody available. If you're mission critical on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and your spouse is doing an essential job or you're dual military, everybody knows the criteria there, then I don't expect your child to be dropped off on Tuesday and Thursday if you can take care for your child. And a lot of people get that, and I appreciate that, but there's some people who don't. And we have that verification system in place mainly through the CMC network in addition to that, that mission critical letter to validate that, yes, you should be dropping your child off. And then there's individual circumstances. Your shift starts later in the day, so we not only okay, so you are going to get childcare on that day, but I wouldn't expect your child to be there from 6 in the morning to 6 p.m. If I would expect you to drop your child off at a reasonable time so that you can then go to work, and then whoever's picking up the child at a reasonable time. All right. We need to minimize the opportunity for spread and minimize interactions. And so, but we need to do that while taking care of all of our mission critical folks. So everybody's situation is different. And yes, we do need to get verification of people's situations. So no, our CYP director is doing a lot of stuff, but she's not calling commands directly. We do have processes for that. So, and then the policies. We are at a place now where we have kind of built the airplane as it's flown, and policies have come down, and so I think we've got a very good system now. And so we'll be, like I said, as we go back through this, then we will be advertising and talking about those things in the recovery ahead of time for everybody. On the school age care, so with the recent announcement of public school buildings remaining closed for the remainder of the school year, what are the plans for the CDC and Youth Center? My family is extremely thankful for the opportunity to retain our children's space in the program while we keep them home without fees. How long will this opportunity last? Will we be notified ahead of time as to when that will end so we can prepare to resume payment? And then there's another one. Oh, so first of all, I'll answer that one. So when is it going to go back? How long will it last? That goes back to the recovery. And I cannot tell you exactly when that's going to happen, but what we will be telling you is what kind of criteria and decisions we'll be making, and getting that notification out ahead of time that will be going back to establishing the school age care program as you know it. But again, I don't know if that's a month from now or July or what it is yet. But we are working through what those decisions look like so that as we start approaching those, we can communicate that well ahead of time. I'm not talking a day ahead of time. I'm talking well ahead of time to be able to communicate those things as we start working through them. So I think I answered. Oh, so then with the CDC, with the youth center and the school district, we are working to, by the way, numbers wise, what we're seeing is about 25 kids in the youth center each day. And we're seeing about 50 to 70 in the CDC program. That I really feel like we've gotten it down to where it needs to be. There are other childcare programs being run outside of us. The school district is running a childcare program, just like the governor had asked school districts to provide childcare programs for essential workers, first responders, medical personnel, and stuff. So Oak Harbor School District is running a childcare program in accordance with that for preschool age kids. I know the Boys and Girls Club is running a program as well, and they're partnered with the school district, working to facilitate the school district's distance learning that just started Monday. I mentioned I've got a second grader, so I spent all day yesterday teleworking and administering homeschool and discovering what this distance learning is looking like, what the synchronous part is and what the asynchronous part of the distance learning curriculum looks like. So we're all discovering what that is, what's going on. There's been a lot of work by the school districts behind the scenes the last couple of weeks to develop these things, and we're going to continue working through that as a community. And obviously, as was alluded to in a question, that's important because kids are out of school until throughout the rest of this year. So, on that note, I will continue to be doing some telework and homeschooling throughout the rest of the school year, helping out on that front. My position allows me to do that. I've got iPads and stuff, and I can work through that while I work through cutting and pasting on one end of the table with the kindergartner and iReady and whatever other stuff that the second grader needs. Um, it, it's there's common and frustration and around that table each day, but we are going to maintain our understanding for those folks who need to work through that through the rest of the school year. Okay, not everybody's in that position where they can telework, but they should be maintaining rotating shifts and stuff. But that's up to commands and that's up to supervisors within those commands to take those individual circumstances into account throughout this pandemic and throughout the school district closure through the school year. All right. So we are working to facilitate that. We've had some success in the couple days that we've done this at the youth center. We had one child show up with their Chromebook all ready to go, and they were able to kind of get their stuff done. We have Chromebooks. The school district was great that they lent us a bunch of Chromebooks, and so we're working to facilitate that connection of Chromebooks inside the youth center so that those children of mission critical parents who have the authorization to put their kids in the youth center can get that schoolwork done within that 8-hour period. Okay, we're still working through what that looks like. It's going to take a couple weeks for us to do that, but I will tell you, we got a lot of passionate people taking care of kids from both the child and youth program side and from the school district side. Okay, the element that really needs to understand what is going on and set the children up for success, because those two elements are setting us up for success. But all the parents need to as well. And I certainly appreciate somebody who's going through this myself. I appreciate the effort it takes to work through this homeschooling thing, especially when it's not in your nature like with us. But as long as parents are dropping their children off with basically an understanding of what that child needs to do and passing that on to the staff, then we will be successful. We're going to be successful in this, absolutely. So that's that. So this other one, I need a better option for care of the school-age daughter. I've been told for 2 years now by CDC that there's no hope for my children to be selected as I'm not a government employee. I work for Whidbey Health and my husband is active duty, but according to the manager of the CDC, that puts me in the D category. How do I go about finding decent care for my school-age child? So I need you to reach out to us. I don't have your name because what I've said all along is if you've got a service member whose position is mission critical and you're doing what the governor characterizes as mission essential work out in the community, then we can bring your children in to provide that school age care capacity for you on the days that you need it. So please, I've asked those who provided this question to me to see if I can get your contact information so we can reach out to you. But if you're hearing this, please, you can send your information to the Whidbey Island PAO email, and we can get you connected to work through that to get your child into school age care. Okay, so that's all the CYP stuff. And so I'm going to move on to the DECA and NEX. So will there be any type of incentive or pay raise for those that work for the NEX or commissary? Well, speaking of the CYP, before this, there is a pay incentive program I mentioned in the video. So we do have some incentive pay that we're paying our staff when they are working. And oh, by the way, because of those numbers that I talked about, sorry, I'm going back to CYP. Because of those numbers I talked about, we are on rotating shifts of staff. So they're on for 2 weeks, they're off for 2 weeks. That really allows us, again, the whole point is to mitigate the opportunity for the virus to spread. So if somebody were to develop symptoms in those couple weeks, we could do the contact tracing and testing, screening, and then testing is required, and understand if there's a situation we need to contain there. And we also have everybody for CDC and Regatta. We have Clover is not being used, so we can use that as a backup facility and all that kind of stuff I've talked about in the past. So that's all great. So as far as the DEC and NEX, there are some things that they're able to pay previously part-time. They can work them full-time. There are some things that the DEC and NEX headquarters have provided as policies, but not really an incentive pay there. And certainly I can continue advocating for that. I appreciate that comment. Is it possible to turn people away who come in with their kids? I don't think it's fair to the child in this situation to be exposed, especially when the adult isn't shopping for essential items. And another question I have is, could the NEX turn people away if they aren't shopping for essential items? So what's essential to you, and what is essential to somebody else? We've closed down access to parts of the store, and there's other ways for people to get things if we really just shut down the store to everything but toilet paper and toothpaste and everything else. But the fact of the matter is, people still need to shop for some of the stuff that's in there. And I don't expect people to go in there just to shop and just hang out for an hour shopping. But we are going to keep it open, and you can see all the protocols we put in place with screening at the one entrance that we have for NEX, the spacing on the floors and everything else. So no, I'm not going to turn people away and ask them, what is it you're shopping for? And no, you can't come in here and get that. But people need to do it responsibly, and they need to minimize their exposure there. As far as turning people away to come in there with kids, absolutely not. I'm not going to do that. I'm in a position personally where I can leave the kids home, but guess what? My spouse isn't deployed, and so yes, even a deployed spouse could conceivably get a friend to do it, but at some point they just need to go take care of stuff. So as far as face coverings, I've got a whole section on face coverings, but I'll go into that now. As I said in the video, any child over 2 should have a face covering when they come in the NEX or commissary. Now, if that 4-year-old doesn't want to keep it on, I get it. Okay, keep doing your thing. And since I brought up face covering, let's just refresh ourselves on what the current CDC guideline is on face covering. When you cannot physically distance, when you can't get that 6 feet, I know that I've seen news reports of, it's up to 12 feet now. But when you can't get that 6 feet, then you should have a face covering on. Okay. So in the exchange in the commissary, the headquarters associated with both of those entities pretty much decided that, well, it's going to be impossible for people to maintain that 6-foot bubble. So therefore, let's just mandate that it's required. And I understand that and respect that. We've taken our own measures to try to make sure that that people can, due to the 75 member capacity, and in the commissary, we haven't felt the need to do that in the exchange. But people need to come in there with face coverings. So if your toddler or your young child isn't going to put it on, you have it there in your person, you can still go in, you can do your thing. Just try to make sure you're physically distanced as you go through that. Okay, I'm sorry. I got a note. NEX incentive is $2 an hour. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. So there is some incentive pay, increasing their hourly wage. Let's see. So NEX and commissary masks are children under the 5. So again, CDC recommendation is over 2 years old. If they won't keep them on, just have them on you, and you can go in and do your shopping. Some people have been turned away at the commissary because their small toddler didn't have it. Okay, I covered that. I will tell you, we have had to escort 2 people off the base who who did not want to comply with our policy as far as the commissary and NEX, and that's unfortunate. And these aren't, we didn't escort toddlers off the base. We escorted adults off the base because they didn't feel that they should comply with our policy. And everybody's got their personal opinions. Everybody reads their articles out there. Develop your own thoughts and theories. But what you cannot dispute is the policies that are in place. And I will not tolerate anybody who is trying to run afoul of the policies here in these measures. I will tell you that they weren't active duty members and they weren't dependents. Okay. So I need everybody out there, retirees, eligible veterans, active duty, dependents, every eligible person who's a patron of the exchange and commissary to A, comply with the policies, and B, be respectful of our staff who are working so hard to try to take care of our community during this time, providing these shopping outlets. Okay. So commissary patron limits. I've seen several couples going together, each taking a cart but shopping together. I thought that was off limits. Only one adult per cart per family. Please clarify. I can tell you in my household that is off limits. We don't end up going shopping together at the commissary, and that's okay. But I usually do the commissary run. Number one, because it's easier for my family, and number two, I like to see what's going on in the commissary and the exchange as we work through these policies. And so I've seen plenty of couples in there and people with older kids. So what I've told the commissary is anybody over the age of 18, they have to have their own ID card and they have to have their own shopping cart. And that helps us with the social distance or the physical distancing. I'm sorry, we're trying to call it physical distancing. That helps us with that distancing. Realizing that there's going to be a few younger kids in the mix again, because that family just needs to work that out. So yes, that's the policy. If you think you see, like one time I was in there by the ice cream section there in the one of the corners, and I found an empty shopping cart sitting there. I'm sure that was a couple who, or some kind of family who they ditched their empty shopping cart once they were in the door. I get it. And that shopping cart sits there, which means we're down to 74 people until I took the shopping cart and gave it back to the front door staff to make sure we try to maximize our capacity. So that is the policy. I think it has been effective to keep the numbers appropriate, and I appreciate all the people who have complied with that. And then, can they put out signs announcing the face mask policy of the seaplane base gates and in the commissary and NEX so people don't get turned away? There are signs at the entrances to the commissary and exchange. I think we're far enough into this that everybody understands what the expectations are. We put it out on our different channels, and so we're there. Do medical or first responder get head of line at NEX or commissary? That's a good question. Let me think about that and see if we can incorporate that. What that does get me to is the early bird. So we reinstituted the early bird. I know that there's some who've been very appreciative of that. I do know also almost every day we have people who don't fit that criteria who are taking advantage of that. So let me explain something there. So our commissary employee at the front is there by DECA direction to check IDs. I have also asked them to monitor the shopping cart situation to maintain 75 carts in the cycle and make sure carts are sanitized and all that stuff. Now, I'm not having them police the people who are coming in. Okay, that's not their job. If I needed to do that, I could have security do it, but I'm not going to do that. I've got other more important things for security to be doing, patrolling the installation and making sure that that we're secure, and doing other law enforcement stuff. I could take other personnel who are underutilized right now and create a watch bell to have a watch for people to stand there and make sure that you meet the early bird criteria. But I think that's a waste of people, and that's bringing people in to do something potentially exposing them where I really don't need to. Because what I really need to have happen is I need to have the people who are eligible for the early bird time be the early bird shoppers and not other people. So I just ask you to do that, and if it grows into more of a problem where people are taking advantage of that time, then my alternative is just to go back to the commissaries open from 9 to 1900, and you just come whenever you want. So I appreciate, that's another one that I just appreciate everybody doing what they should be doing there. Okay. Great. So that's all the DECA and NEX questions and issues. One of the things that I mentioned in the comments in our Facebook video was somebody had the recommendation of providing one-way signs, and so great recommendation. I had thought of the same when I saw a local news report that one of the supermarkets in the Seattle area was doing that, and I had talked with our commissary director, and sure enough, the commissary headquarters already had that brilliant idea, and they're distributing the stickers to put on the aisles to have one-way traffic through the aisles, and that just helps so people aren't meeting like this, that you're just following along, and you're going at the pace of the person in front of you, ideally, unless you can pass. I see a lot of people wearing face coverings in there. Obviously, everybody has to now. But this is a policy that I'm sure some of you out there expect that once the one-way signs go on the deck, that people comply. Okay? Just like face coverings takes a little while to get compliance, and all these other policies, it takes a little while to get compliance. It just doesn't happen. It certainly doesn't happen just because I order it. It would be great, especially around my house. But that's not how it happens. And I know my boys are watching right now. So anyway, but yes, the one-way signs are going on the deck. The commissary staff is not going to sit there and police that. Okay. And I would also appreciate if people would be respectful and understanding of each other, and understand that, hey, maybe people missed it or whatever. So we don't need to do social shaming and all that other stuff. Just let's work towards following the one-way traffic, and again, minimizing the opportunities. What's that? Yeah, I talked with the commissary director on my way over there, and so I know that the stuff is down there on the deck, but it'll take a couple days. And remember, just people don't come in the commissary every day, so it might take a week or 2 weeks to get the entire population to see that yes, we do have one-way signs and a flow through the commissary. Okay. All right. So DECA and NEX, none. Let's talk deployments. If it happened that a service member's spouse contracted the virus while they were deployed, are there guidelines in place to assist these families? What would the service member be allowed to return home? So if you contract the virus while you're deployed, then you're going to be quarantined, isolated at that point at your location. You're not going to come home. Okay, so that might mean the rest of your squadron returns home, and they might have to leave a couple people behind. But a lot of the places where we deploy, there's an incoming squadron, and so certainly that's something that we're not articulating exact policy for that support. That's based on the situation. So we work between commands. We work with the base that's there to make sure that that service member is supported until they've met all the criteria to return to work, to travel again, to then come home. And then they're going to go into a ROM status after they've traveled. So that service member will be taken care of. For the family, obviously, a deployment is a concerning time as it is, let alone those kinds of situations where all the squadron's coming home except your service member, and those kinds of things. So I know there's some anxiety and anguish with those kinds of things. Is my loved one being taken care of? And so certainly we'll work through that as we work through all these homecomings. And I appreciate the anxiety with that. As far as the group homecoming, there's a question in here. How does the homecoming of the terminal work? So let me just walk through a homecoming real quick from what we've seen so far. And there's another question about with the with the stop movement order. Is that going to stop homecomings? No, it's not. Okay. There is a process for these commands to be vetted as far as the necessity to bring them home, rotate them out. And we've already had a couple commands come home recently. And so so first of all, that decision about rotating a unit gets done up at the highest levels of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Once the authorization for that redeployment happens, then that unit starts going through kind of a restriction of movement, a bubble to bubble, we're starting to call it, to make sure that they're minimizing their opportunity for exposure at their current location. And then once they're with every home in the past too, there's been an advanced debt that comes home. Okay. So whenever anybody travels, I don't care if you're traveling from Japan, Antarctica, New York, Mississippi, or Eastern Washington. Okay. If you're traveling from outside the local area, which we kind of include our housing area, basically where people live. Okay. And that kind of liberty area. If you're traveling from outside of that area, you're going to go through a post-travel ROM, restriction of movement, that's going to last for 14 days. And the point there is, it's not because you have the virus, it's just because you have a slightly increased opportunity to have contracted the virus while you're traveling or where you're traveling from, all that kind of stuff. So we're going to put you in a restriction of movement status when you come here. So when that advanced debt comes back from that deployment site, all the personnel go through a ROM, okay, for 14 days. And the rest of the Team Whidbey crew supports those members who are in ROM. So where do those people ROM? Okay. And I've got an itch on the end of my nose that I'm trying not to itch right now. So anyway, where do those people ROM? So if they're entitled to the UH, the barracks, unaccompanied housing, then they will go into their assigned barracks room, and they'll ROM in their assigned barracks room. If they have a house family here, or if they have a house, they have a roommate situation that's already arranged, then they will ROM at their location. Also, we are providing a page 13 that they sign. We provided a template to all the commands, so the commands can use those, and so that there's a clear understanding of what the expectations are in that status. And so then, so that's barracks, that's people who live out in town or in base housing. And then lastly, there are people who maybe when they went on deployment, they got out of their lease, they don't have a place to go to, or if they have a family and they've got health concerns with the family and they don't want to ROM in their house for whatever reason, we have the ability to, our primary desire is to put them into NGIS or Navy Lodge, and there's a line of accounting that can be that's taken care of. Okay, so they're put into one of those facilities. If there's not any space, which right now we really don't have space in those two facilities, then the wing and the squadron works to get them ROM'd out in town at a hotel, and that's all done appropriately. So the rest of the community takes care of their needs, making sure that they have food. Our galley is producing. We're producing over 600, almost 700 meals per meal to get to ROM personnel, plus the people who are coming in for the takeout meals. So tremendous work by the galley staff to make sure that we're providing quality meals to our ROM personnel on base. And so that's how the advanced debt gets taken care of. Once the advanced debt gets out of ROM, the rest of the squadron comes home, and we're relying on that advanced debt to support the rest of the squadron while they're in ROM. Okay, so that's how the homecoming works. Now, as part of that, the question is, how does the homecoming work at the terminal? Okay, kind of going back to the schools, it's like the school pickup. Okay, we're not doing all the family there lined up waiting for the mass to come off the airlift. Okay, we bring the folks in off the airlift in the terminal, and then we're expecting a methodical method of folks to get picked up in a way that allows us to maintain the distancing between families. Obviously, I don't expect physical distancing of the loved ones coming together, but certainly between the families who are waiting and all that stuff, I certainly expect people to maintain their distance, wear face coverings as appropriate, and all that kind of stuff. Okay. But I just want to reiterate the fact that just because your service member is coming home from overseas doesn't mean they have COVID-19. Okay, just as much as if they're coming from Seattle or New York or anywhere else. Okay, so understand that we're taking appropriate precautions, and that ROM period is there so that if that person were to develop symptoms, then they can be screened, tested, put into quarantine or isolation as appropriate. Okay. Will Italy deployers be quarantined on return? So same thing. I don't care where you're coming from. Obviously Italy's been through a lot. The whole of Italy, it's Sicily and Sigonella, we're not immune to that whole thing, and so it doesn't matter where you're coming from. It's the same process. All right. Oh, and by the way, before they get on the airlift, they get screened. So they get the standard screening questions, and then they get on the airlift. So okay, doing everything we can to make sure that we mitigate this thing. So that's that deployment question. Was that one? If they're allowed to return home, there was another deployment question down here. Okay, so if the DoD extends the stop movement order, will this continue to affect our service members who are currently delayed overseas? Thank you very much. I appreciate the appreciative comments, but well, take in the news, Harry S. Truman has been delayed returning, and so that's our rooks of VAQ 137 who are on the Truman now, basically doing COM2X style things off the coast, off the Atlantic coast, while we work through deployments of the Nimitz Strike Group and other carriers to make sure that we maintain that global force presence. So there are follow-on effects of deployments being delayed. So VAQ 137, when they come home, they don't have to ROM because they've been on a ship at sea for a very long time without a port call. Okay, so that has been minimized because they have not been imported. Our squadron on board other ships at sea, obviously the TR, we're all following the news on the TR, and my heart goes out to the Roosevelt crew, my good friend Brett Crozier, and also the family and friends of the sailor who passed away in that whole thing. So that's its own situation. And then you got Harry S. Truman, which is COVID free, has been out to sea for a long time without a port call. And we look forward to the rooks coming home, but they're going to come home at an appropriate time based on our global force presence there. We've got, so we can also go into pre-deployment ROM. All right, sorry, I'm dwelling on this stuff, but there's just a lot going on. So pre-deployment ROM looks a little different than post-deployment. Okay, post-deployment, the squadron comes back and we can shut them down for a couple weeks. Okay, like I talked about, all their personnel go home for a couple weeks basically, and the advanced deck can catch the aircraft and just kind of do whatever routine maintenance is required just to keep the aircraft taken care of while we take care of the personnel. But that squadron doesn't need to be flying like a pre-deployment squadron needs to be. So a pre-deployment, when you look at a pre-deployment squadron going out to an aircraft carrier, there's a couple of things that have to happen. One is they have to be ready, safe, proficient to fly the aircraft on and off the aircraft carrier as they deploy. Okay, that means we can't shut them down for a couple of weeks before they leave. We can't put them in ROM for a couple of weeks before they leave. Also, we really need to make sure that we mitigate the opportunity for this virus to get out to another carrier. So pre-deployment, what we have developed is we're ROMing those personnel on base. We've got them in NGIS and we've got them in the barracks, and we are taking care of them on base. So their deployment started the moment they went into pre-deployment ROM. They're on a bubble to bubble, so on base between NGIS and barracks and their hangar, because guess what they also have to do? They also have to fly. They have to do FCLPs. Okay, we're doing operations at OLF, Coopville, and Alt Field to support the squadron going out to sea. So these are important things as we look at taking care of our personnel and families and being mission ready. So a pre-deployment squadron is a very tricky affair to make sure that we are minimizing every opportunity for that virus to get out to the ship while we maximize their mission readiness to go out there and do what needs to be done. Okay, so this deployment question. So we do have some squadrons who are land-based overseas. Their return has been delayed. We will continue to monitor that. We do have some rotations taking place, both on the maritime patrol side and the VAQ side. So there's a lot of in and out within all that. And I'll take that opportunity to highlight the ombudsman. I did a Facebook Live with the ombudsman assembly group last month. I'll do it again this month. A good opportunity for you to provide your questions to your ombudsman. How do I know who my ombudsman is? Okay, so there's a website that you can go to, and I tested it out myself. Right, I went to the ombudsman website. I put in my name and my command. I could select my command from the drop-down list, and I was able to send a message, and then my ombudsman reached out to me to answer that message. So anybody out there can find out who your ombudsman is through that website. All right, and if we get that, we'll put that website into the comments here. So I really encourage you to reach out to your ombudsman. All right, the ombudsman should have a list of all the personnel in their command and be able to contact them, and they should be contacting people as appropriate. But if you have a question, please provide it to your ombudsman if you need to, because they're the ones who are going to be really tracking all their individual deployment. We do work across the 50 commands to track all this stuff, but there's a lot of specific situations with commands there. Okay. Let me go back to the homecoming questions, because there were deployment questions and homecoming questions. So I think I answered how our homecomings at the air terminal base going to work. Let's see. So there was a question with a homecoming that's delayed. How's this going to happen with the policy and concerns regarding COVID-19? Will no one be allowed back until the pandemic's completely over? Absolutely not. We're working through homecomings and deployments appropriately. So if our sailors do come home soon, still in question, will there be enough room in the barracks for all of them or only for the single folks? So the important thing about the barracks is that we only have enough barracks rooms for those sailors who are eligible. So E3 and below and E4 less than 4 years, who we haven't authorized BH to be living out in town. We have tried to clear out as many people who have arrangements out in town, providing them with BH so that we can maximize the room in the barracks. But we don't have enough barracks rooms just sitting empty, waiting for whoever needs them. So we are really working to manage the eligible sailors for those barracks. So as I said before, you'll ROM in the barracks if you're eligible. You ROM at home, whether it's base housing or out in town if you have a place. Otherwise, your command can arrange for NGIS, Navy Lodge if available, and then hotel out in town otherwise. So that's that one. Okay, so that's all the deployment and homecoming questions. Any others there? You got another one though I can throw in my mix. Thanks, XO. Okay. All right. Yes, this is one that I've got for my note later. So speaking of barracks, I'll go out and answer this one now. I've heard that people are congregating in the barracks in groups. Exclamation point. Well, I tell you, so this goes with all the policies out there. Back to, hey, what's getting us here? You know, I can't talk about specific numbers of cases on the base, unfortunately, but there's reasons why that's the case. But I can tell you that we are doing a great job here at NAS Whidbey Island and Team Whidbey, keeping us down well below this level. Okay. You know, I did put out there that we did have our first case a few weeks ago. And so, yes, there are some cases here on the base of positive COVID cases. And there's a lot of ROM personnel. And I talked about all that ROM criteria of homecomings and pre-deployment ROM, and then PUI, person under investigation, and quarantines and isolations, all that stuff. So there's a lot of people in this collective thing. Remember, pre-deployment, post-deployment ROM, post-travel ROM doesn't mean you have the virus. It's just your ROM somewhere. So anyway, but all the measures that we put in place to get us here are keeping the numbers low, which is very important. So unfortunately, out of all the sailors in the barracks, we got a lot of people who are doing things right, and we got some people who are doing things wrong. I can tell you that I have the NJP authority over all sailors in the barracks, no matter what their command. Okay, and I have talked with the XO and CMC, and we've expressed to all the commands that I am not unwilling to take the NJP authority from anybody to emphasize the policy that needs to be there, that adhered to, which is we put all these measures in place to make sure we're doing screening at buildings and hangars. We're maintaining physical distancing. We're wearing face coverings when your job or your situation doesn't allow you to meet those physical distancing standards. And then you go, whether it's the barracks or in a house, in PPV housing, or a barbecue behind the NGIS, whatever it is, and you congregate. It doesn't make sense. Okay. You got to do the things all the time to make sure that we are complying with these policies. Okay. And there was at another base nearby, there was a sporting activity. There was a bunch of enterprising folks got together from different commands and decided that they would have a pickup baseball or basketball game. That doesn't work right now. We can't be doing that. We got to maintain this physical distancing. And I tell you what, the weather's beautiful outside, and people are going to feel a sense of comfort that, okay, we got this thing taken care of. And so what's the harm if a few of us get together? Well, that could end up being a few people catching the virus because there's an asymptomatic person in there who's got it, who spreads it to everybody else. And then they spread it to a couple friends, and they spread it to a couple friends. And next thing you know, we got a hot spot, and we're affecting the health and welfare of our people, and we're affecting our mission readiness. So everybody needs to comply with these policies. All right. And, we did have some sailors in the barracks over the weekend. We had a few of them who we caught getting together, and we're applying a process to take care of them. So let me go to this last question that I got. I'm hearing and seeing many military personnel socializing outside of work. Shouldn't we be setting an example of social distancing when not on base? Shelter in place order is not optional, but those who are still going into work and don't see their day-to-day routine affected seem to think the rules don't apply to them outside of work either. Gatherings in their homes avoid any efforts happening on base. And they finish with stronger leadership and repercussions. Okay. Well, I invite you to call me anytime and tell me how to be a stronger leader. But I will tell you that we got strong leaders across the base. What we got are some individuals who choose to disregard policies. And I'll tell you what, the pandemic is no different than other times. We still have, unfortunately, we always have people who disregard policies, and that's why we have a process of counseling, NJP, and all this kind of stuff to take care of that. And we will use all those processes for the repercussions that those folks deserve. So yes, we will continue working that. And so, like I was saying, people are going to get comfortable because it's good weather, and what's the harm? Well, there is harm. Please don't do it. All right. So going back to, okay, so into our face covering section. One thing I'll lead off with face covering. So yes, the policy, the CDC guidelines came out on a Friday that kind of reversed course on face coverings. Over the weekend, we had the OSD and Navy policy trickle down in the NAV admin. So let me just talk about that NAV admin real quick. It's said in there that any face covering of a nature that complied with the CDC guidelines on their website that was conservative in nature would be permitted. And the reason we did that is because just because the CDC puts out a new guideline doesn't mean we all of a sudden magically have the ability to produce 10,500 face coverings just for the people who work on the base. That's why the policy said that you could make your own as long as it was conservative in nature and nothing offensive or anything like that. So so certainly, I mean, I've got on me, I've got my my little uh, Home Depot little mask that I had to change out the litter box that I had gotten a little while ago. So I use that thing until I can get a cloth face covering. But cover your nose and mouth. Okay, don't um, coming up with a word that I can't really use. But anyway, a proper one and properly used, um, but and used when you can't meet that physical distancing requirements. Okay. So meanwhile, here's what's going on. Okay. So the Navy right away started gearing up the logistics train to procure face coverings. Now, also imagine this is just the Navy inside the U.S. I've traveled all over the world. Okay, I know in Asia they're more apt to use face coverings uh, before this and throughout this, and so I know in the Middle East that they a lot of them wear face coverings all the time anyway. But I'll tell you, in Europe and America, it hasn't been this way. So so now our Navy system start spinning up to procure face coverings while everybody's trying to get face coverings. So, so I know that there's a lot of spouses and volunteers out there who felt a lot of burden of creating these things, and I really appreciate all the volunteer effort and passion behind trying to help us work through this policy change and make sure that our personnel have appropriate face coverings when they need them. What we are doing is so the Navy system is keying up on making face coverings and providing them. But their number one priority are those personnel who are deployed and operational. Okay. Me, as the commanding officer of the base, is not a top priority to get a Navy procured face covering. All right. I come after deployed operational units. Okay. Operational units who are here at home, operational unit enablers, and that includes all the air traffic control, security, child and youth program personnel. All these people come ahead of me before I get my two Navy procured face coverings, and that's going to take a while for it to trickle down to me. Um, so, so what can I do? Well, I can cut up a black T-shirt and make my own face covering, and that's perfectly appropriate. Or I can wear a bandana if I want. That's appropriate. All those kinds of things that the policy says. So, so you know, we can take care of that. And also, oh by the way, so the Navy's going to procure those things. We're also working locally to procure those things for our people ahead of time. So we have our parariggers in the squadrons. We have our tailors at the NEX, and so commands, including my command, have bought bolts of fabric. Okay, now granted, I bet the cost of a bolt of fabric is going to go up as the demand goes up across the country. But anyway, we bought bolts of fabric and we provided them to parariggers and the tailors at the NEX to produce appropriate face coverings for our service members. So those are all the things that we're doing to comply with the CDC guideline. But the guideline came out with Friday. That doesn't mean Monday morning that we had Navy procured face coverings right away. So again, I really appreciate all the volunteers out there helping out to produce face coverings. And I know that information's out there, and I really appreciate the consolidation and the providing of that information for everybody to work through this thing. So so as a spouse whose husband is currently deployed, I worry about his safety. The SecDef has issued guidelines requiring troops to wear masks, yet there are none to be dispersed. Is the base able to assist our commands with getting any equipment sent to det sites? So yes, absolutely. All those dets should have parariggers, and so those commands should be using those same methods to try to produce. But again, um, you know, let's not overdo this. In a minute, you can cut up a black T-shirt and make a few face coverings by the way that the CDC recommends it being done. Okay. Let's see, and then our spouses group is currently working on sending 200 masks. So I really do appreciate that. That aside, even some service members still aren't capable enough to be able to hand make a face mask, face covering. So I appreciate the efforts of spouses and volunteers to provide that kind of stuff. Okay, And so if the base doesn't have the ability to provide equipment, so yes, as I said, we do have that ability, and we're working through that. I understand service members are important, but why aren't those at the true front lines, NEX and DECA, provided with the face mask from the tailor shop? So I do know that the NEX was engaging with their tailors first to get their employees taken care of. And I've been in the DECA, and I know that that it came out on Friday, and the next Friday is when the DECA and NEX said that you had to have them. And so I feel like we've gotten there. Okay. Um, but uh, but our security forces being provided face coverings, yes, same process we're working through to make sure all of our security forces. Also, we authorize the use of the balaclavas that we've provided to them, and other things. So it's not just a face covering; it's just a cloth covering, and we had other things in the arsenal to be able to use. Are people supposed to be following the face mask wearing nav admin protocols? I see lots of people not keeping the proper social distancing requirements or properly wearing face coverings, such as covering their mouths but not noses. So yes, obviously everybody's supposed to follow it. But let's take an example. Okay, I go with my family. I go with my kids in Mailer Point. There, walking the trail, a Mailer Point trail. My kids bike. I go for a run or whatever, or my wife and I go for a walk, and I see people wearing face coverings as they're going for a walk. That's your prerogative. Okay, if you're walking with your family and you want to wear the face covering, that's fine. I usually don't wear a face covering there, but what I do is when I am approaching somebody, I get off the sidewalk to maintain that 6 foot physical distancing. So so there's plenty of opportunity in those environments to make sure we maintain our physical distancing between families. Um, not inside the family, because we're not doing that in the house anyway. So it's your prerogative to wear the face covering if you can maintain your physical distancing. But once you are in a position where you can't maintain that physical distancing, yes, absolutely, you should be wearing your face covering. Another point that was brought up on one of these Naval Aviation Enterprise phone calls, we have one Monday, Wednesday, and Friday with all the naval aviation leaders. It's like 100 some people on the phone call, all the way up to Admiral Miller. One of the things that was brought up was sailors were feeling more empowered to work close together because they have a face covering. No, that's not the point. Okay. If you're at consoles in air traffic control and we can't just magically pick those consoles up and put them 6 feet apart, then you need to wear a face covering. Okay. If you're doing a maintenance action and on an aircraft and you can maintain your 6 foot distance, then maintain your 6 feet of distance. Okay. But if you're in a position in your job or something where you can't maintain that physical distancing, wear a face covering. That means have it on you at all times. Okay, into financial. How are we doing on time? Oh my, oh boy. All right, an hour. I apologize. Probably rambling too much. So I can't afford to shop groceries for 30 days now. I'm very anxious on how I can find supplies in the weeks if people are hoarding all the commissary supplies. Please advise. Um, shouldn't need to. Like I said, I shop the commissary all the time. A couple times a week I'm there, and they're doing a tremendous job keeping up with supply. Yeah, I need flour. That's been hard to come by. Rice has been hard to come by, and other things. That's why we put limits on certain things. So we'll continue assessing those limits, but you shouldn't have to shop for 30 days. But it gets back to the financial. What financial resources to support us during these times? For those with lower income, don't have access to funds until payday, can't stock up. What resources would you provide them before shelves are empty? So, you might not get exactly what you want at the exact day that you're going, but I do seriously believe that you're going to get the food you need to work through this. It really comes down to the income piece, because some of our families are already in a low income situation, and then their spouse might have lost their job in this whole situation. Now, the millions and millions of people have lost jobs in this pandemic, so that puts them in harder financial straits. So Navy Marine Corps Relief is there for you. Okay, they're there for you. They might not be there right in person. The thrift shop is still closed, but their personnel there are there to provide counseling and help you out, provide loans or grants as necessary to help you out. The other one is our Fleet and Family Support Center is still there. Our PFM, which is a personal financial manager, is still there, available, ready to talk to you about managing finances. So those are the things that are there to help you out and through this situation, which I absolutely can understand how challenging that can be. All right. Okay, into some non-COVID questions. Well, actually, I'm sorry. I will hit the COVID-related housing questions first. So, mother of 2 autistic children, ABA, OT services, CDC, schools have halted. Those were the only places that your kids could exert energy besides the playground. When we'll be able to take our kids to the park again? You can only imagine how incredibly difficult this is on those whose routines have been stopped suddenly. Totally agree with you. That is a challenge. The next question: base playgrounds. These are technically run by housing, but many kids are still gathering and playing on them. Is there any plan to put up signage about them being closed, or to more fully encourage families to keep kids apart? I'll talk to Hunt, see if I saw some parks out in town. They put the like caution tape around the play equipment. Maybe we can do that, but really, it's incumbent on our folks. But also, I completely understand the other person's question about when are the playgrounds going to be open again. I can't tell you right now. It'll be built into the criteria, and we will communicate that. Obviously, that is. I looked for alignment with our local community on closing playgrounds, so I fully suspect that I'll look for alignment on opening that kind of stuff as well. But I will tell you one thing. One of my sailors came to me and said that they had problems with the ABA services, that they weren't doing telehealth. This was early on. So we really dug into it. And there are a lot of telecounseling services that have come online, including ABA. So TRICARE is authorizing that. So I encourage you to still work to get those services that your children in this case deserve to continue that, which is challenging. I completely understand. But the other thing is that, so if you're on base, and this hits home for me because I promised my kids a trampoline when we got here to Whidbey Island. However, that's not permitted here, and but Hunt does have an exception to policy if your children would kind of need that activity, that you could, whether temporarily or not, where you can call Hunt and talk to them. If there's something in particular that you would normally have, then talk to Hunt, okay? Help them to understand what your situation is and see if there's something they can do to help facilitate accommodating you during this time, okay? All right. So that's playgrounds. So a couple non-COVID related. One is RECIP. Okay, I sent the letter out recently highlighting the suspension of the RECIP. Question is, will BH be adjusted to ensure we have the ability to pay our utilities when the programs are restarted? No, BH is not going to be adjusted. Okay, only 10, out of 100% of the people who live in housing, 10% in their like model comparison are above the cutoff and therefore owe money each month for utilities, or on those months that they're over, and 10% get a refund. Everybody else sits in the middle. The RECIP program has been very beneficial to bring down the overall cost of utilities, to bring down usage appropriately, and it's important on all of us to make sure that we're utilizing our utilities appropriately. So the goal of this suspension that was mandated by Congress was take a look at the program and make sure that that it's being applied appropriately. And so no, there's no BAH change that's going to come out of this. But if you feel that your house, that you've been paying utilities in the RECIP program unfairly, then talk to Hunt, get a utility investigation, energy investigation going, so that we can make sure that there's nothing wrong with the house or any appliances and stuff. Housing, mosquitoes. One hits close to home. Will the base spray for mosquitoes this year? With families staying home and having to go outside for exercise on Mailer Point, I'm afraid that going outside is going to be very challenging and require a lot of bug spray. Can the base please spray for bugs this year? It was so bad last year and hope that will not be the case this year. I also hope that will not be the case. I and my family can't stand having beautiful days out there where we can't even sit outside and enjoy our community because of the mosquitoes. And I am working hard to see if there's things that we can do, um, even to include spraying. So we are working through that. It does require a permit with the EPA, and we're working through that process. We're also working some other mitigations. We're kind of trying to mow down the areas of drainage. We're looking at putting larvicide pellets into drainage areas and mosquito magnets and all kinds of stuff to try to do a multi-layered defense to kill those things um, before they get started. I cannot promise that I'm going to get them down to zero, but I do want to have an effect on reducing the intensity of those things, because that's not fun. Housing work orders. When will Hunt be able to resume work orders? I don't know. It's part of the recovery plan, but we will communicate that as we go. And I've had to do a few routine stuff on my house that I just didn't want to wait for. But I realize that not everybody can do that. Okay. So if you do have something that kind of was routine, it's getting a little more urgent, just talk to Hunt, see if there's something you can work out. And then meanwhile, we'll communicate that process of restoring that service. Oh, by the way, back to mosquitoes. I do walk around the neighborhood, and a couple things. One is I talked to the mailman last year, and he said that the mail carriers in Victory Terrace also complain about the mosquitoes. We see a lot of complaints come out of Mailer, and of course that's where I live, and I know how horrible they are there. Not so much in Victory Terrace and Preston Harbor. We are working to make sure we understand where the problem really is and do the right mitigations in all those areas. The other thing is, okay, you got to make sure you minimize standing water in your own yard. Okay, you also have to cut your lawn in your backyard. I walk around, I see lawns with some long grass. If you don't have the ability to do it yourself, if your service member is deployed, Hunt has a program that you can pay them a fee to mow their yard. And also, I've seen signs for kids who are willing to do that. I think that we can do that kind of thing appropriately. But really, I mean, Hunt is really your one because they've got lawn maintenance folks going around. And so please reach out to them if you're having problems getting your yard mowed, because that will help everybody else out in this mosquito situation. Okay, just a few more questions here. Let me hit the clinic questions. First thing that the clinic wanted you to understand is imperative that all people coming to the clinic should already be wearing face coverings. Folks are coming there expecting that they will be provided for them, but that's not the case. Supplies are limited and need to be reserved for care providers. So yes, just like the exchange of commissary and everyday life nowadays, please show up with your face covering, not only on you when you go in the clinic, but on you when you go into the clinic. Okay. And the exchange of commissary and other places as it is appropriate in the situation. So second, just recently expected to have an e-visit capability for COVID screening questions. Did that happen, Elise? Okay. Not working yet. Okay, so e-visit capability for COVID screening questions. The folks are using the MHS Genesis patient portal, which I highly recommend. I found it very useful for me and my family. They can go there and fill out COVID questionnaire. Then that goes to the nurses who will call them back or respond via the portal. It is then also documented in Genesis, as well as it's good to have that situational awareness for their providers to follow up on. So certainly I would expect through the clinic's Facebook, and we'll amplify that message when that system is up and running to help you out. And then the clinic pharmacy. My spouse is deployed, and with new restrictions on social distancing, how am I supposed to get medications refilled without taking my children to the clinic with me? So a few things. First of all, they're really working to minimize the number of people in there. However, everybody is understanding of somebody's situation. If your spouse is deployed and you have to take care of the kids, and you obviously can't just drop them off on anybody because we're trying to maintain physical distancing. So if you need to bring them, then state that when you get there, and they'll be understanding, and you can get your medications that way. A couple other options: they can send the medications out to a pharmacy in town, so you can pick them up in town if you want. You can do that home delivery, which we do as well, and And then lastly, a friend can pick them up for you as long as they have a picture of front and back of your ID card. Okay, so a friend can go pick them up for you, drop them off at the house, and maintain all that appropriate distancing. So there are options out there. I do understand how troubling that can be to make sure you get those prescriptions. Okay, PCS, it seems likely PCS pause will be extended. Well, yes, it has been. We just saw that policy. Not exactly sure. I don't think we got a clarification on exactly when the current stop movement is out, but I expect it to be for a couple more months. Um, so, will anyone affected receive an orders mod, just as we've had with all the people who have already been affected? Those people who are affected under the continued stop movement will receive an orders modification. There are some people whose PCSs are still going to continue, critical personnel who need to get moved. And so that there is a waiver process in effect to be able to look at those individual cases. Let's see, answer those. And a few management questions. What are you doing to help protect those of us who are high risk EFM families? Please don't say talk to your command because my command doesn't care. Okay. Well, I'm sorry you get that impression. I have the command listed here, and I can absolutely tell you from working with the leadership of this command that they do care. Okay. It's unfortunate that that throughout the chain that you're getting that impression. So EFM high risk is obviously a big concern during this time, and um, so I'm going to reach back to you. I can reach back to the person who provided this question and see if I can engage directly between you and the command to help resolve your situation. And then please explain to me how such a huge command can go from blue and silver right now to work Monday through Thursday is improving the safety of your sailors and their families. I understand you need to be mission ready, but why are we going backwards, not forward, when this pandemic is just getting started? And also, why are so many of our leaders afraid to be proactive in minimizing the number of people required to be at work in order to comply with the CDC guidelines while still maintaining the ability to accomplish the mission? The entire base needs to look at what needs to be accomplished and figure out how to spread the workload evenly. Okay, so a few things there. One is uh, a command can absolutely change the way things go from one week to another, depending on how their mission evolves from one week to another. Certainly, at the outset of this, I know some commands took a very stringent approach, trying to really minimize the number of people, but that was not really a sustainable way to do things and maintain their mission effectiveness. So they had to bring in additional people and modify how they were doing things. So that's one thing there. And then one growler squadron, for example, might be in a different part of their cycle than the other growler squadron right next door. So there might be different approaches as to how to manage their readiness levels while taking care of their people as well. So it's hard to do a direct comparison, but I can tell you because I do talk with lieutenant leaders, and I do know that they all understand the importance of protecting our people and families and being mission ready, how their mission is dictated to them. So I do know that there's a lot of people working hard to do that, and that empowerment, like within my command, I've empowered supervisors to make those decisions in their teams. We're a team of teams, and what works within my command with one team doesn't work with another one. So those team leaders understand what they need to get done for their mission in their team and what the individual circumstances of their teams, and they are empowered to make those decisions. The entire base needs to look at what needs to be accomplished, figure out how to spread the workload evenly. That's just not going to happen because specialties across commands. I know that there were some growler commands that were working shared responsibility. You can do that with light commands, but we're not going to take patrol wing personnel doing growler stuff or doing helicopter stuff or doing air traffic control. So we have to, within those entities, work those mitigations out. And I appreciate the feedback. I appreciate the concerns. I will continue to impress that upon our tenant leaders because not only do individuals need to keep doing the things adherent to all these policies I talked about, but command leaders need to keep looking at this every day, every week, make sure we're striking the right balance of taking care of our people and families and being mission ready. I will tell you that's longer than I thought it was going to be. I do apologize. I rambled a little bit here and there. Any other questions come in? Needless to say, we had a much reduced viewership on this, as I kind of expected. But I got a couple questions here we'll wrap up with. Are CYP staff being held responsible for children completing schoolwork? Okay, so this gets back to the what we're doing to accommodate the distance learning in the school-age care. Okay, so it's just the youth center, school-age care, where we're taking care of about 25 to 30 children each day, and so so they within the time period, and we're working through. You can go back to the beginning of the video on my whole diatribe on this thing. We've got a lot of passionate people trying to take care of our kids, but in this respect, and facilitating them being able to do the distance learning, both synchronous and asynchronous, that the school district is providing. So, are they being held responsible? They are responsible for the entire youth center program. And the other interesting thing is, of all the 72 installations across the Navy, there's only us and one other one that is overseas that is accommodating district or the school district's distance learning in our program. Okay, so we're doing it because we believe it's the right thing to do, but that does not completely absolve the parents of their responsibility to make sure they understand what's required of them and their children, and to set their children up for success when they drop their children off at school age care. We're not going to take up the slack of parents who might not be completely engaged, but I will tell you, we got some parents who really have worked to set up their kids successfully, and we've seen some good outcomes out of that. I'm sure it's going to be successful, and I really appreciate all the effort of our youth center staff and all the stress they're going through, working through this, and helping to take care of our children. Is there guidance for people living in and commuting from Snohomish and King County? This is another one of those where it's individual situations. If that person is mission critical and they need to be at work, then they need to come into work and do their job and maintain the appropriate protocols. But really, if they can telework, I know that with my folks, we encourage as much distributed workforce stuff as we can. And so I would encourage people to look at that. But we are not saying that you can't come over here. If you live over in Snohomish County, you can't come here. We've never said that. We strongly discourage people from going to visit just for the fun of it over there. But there are people who live there and they need to work here, and we can do that responsibly. Okay. All right. Hey, thanks everybody. We still got a few people who held in there. For those few people who are still here, I will ask you again, please subscribe to our YouTube channel so we can be more effective at getting a broader range of people out there. We'll provide answers to these questions on our website in a few days and notify you of that. So thank you much. Be safe out there, and please keep the feedback coming. Keep the questions coming. We will. Sorry, almost. NCIS warning about fraud out there. Be careful. There are some bad actors out there. This was the NFCU fraud that was out there. So please don't fall victim to that. For those of you who are still on here or who might watch this video later, speaking of bad activities out there, we had a car prowler out in Victory Terrace that broke into a few, well, didn't break in because people didn't lock their cars. Even in housing there, and they had some valuables in their cars. So I encourage you, even when you live in housing, even if you're a mailer point behind the fence line, take a serious look at your own security. But our CID team did excellent work, and they were able to work with local authorities, and there are warrants for arrest for 2 people who we identified in our investigative work, and hopefully we'll get those people into the justice system to take care of that. Talked about those things, and I talked about it. Hey, great, I hit the rest of my stuff. The last thing I'll say is I expressed appreciation for a lot of people out there working this. I also have developed an appreciation for our barbers as I try to do my own haircut and cut the kids' hair. I still don't know how you do that comb, hold, and cut thing. I'm working on that. Maybe by the time this is over, I'll have some capability there. But and definitely the teachers out there as I participate in homeschooling our kids. So I appreciate everybody involved in what you're going through. So thanks.